I was introduced as a practitioner to a shift in worldview that can be summarized as space connects rather than space separates. And this shift was very intriguing to me from the get-go. You are with someone or something, and there's space between. And this space between creates a separation, if you choose to look at it that way. Then you have here and there. And what's between is space. Right? And then if you turn this around and you say space connects, then you still have a here and there, but now there is a bond between those things, between me and you, because the space holds us together rather than pushes us apart. This is very simple and profound and far-reaching, because my observation is that most people have an implicit worldview that space separates. At least when I was introduced to this idea, I recognized in myself that I had that implicit view, and I was not really questioning it. I mean, it didn't even surface to a level of consciousness. It was just like an implicit truth or a given, or I was living in accord with it in some way. So when I started to explore it, and don't think that I did this in some kind of systematic way, it just happened in a kind of, I don't want to call it chaotic, but not structured, unstructured way. One of my first experiments was that I stopped confining the space between to just between, but I realized that I could let it flow around the object that I was interacting with. I could have the space expand, let's call it, beyond not just the surface of it as a kind of block, but I could let it envelop the object. And then I realized that I could also let it envelop myself in the back. So that when I was interacting with a person, I could sometimes, instead of feeling space separates between us or just connects us, I could feel that the space became a kind of bubble, and I was existing with the object, a tree or a car or flower, or a person. I could feel myself existing with and within a kind of bubble of space. But even just the word bubble brings with it a boundary, and then you can get bothered by the boundary. And you let space exceed this boundary. And then space becomes infinite. Because where do you draw the boundary? There really isn't one. You have to make the boundary for it to be there. You can take something as the boundary. We can take the outline of this room as the boundary that confines space to an inside. But you can expand and let space exceed that boundary. It's not hard to do. But we're just talking about view, like how do you set it up? Then I was bothered by realizing that I had space always just flow around the objects, when that really wasn't the case. Space penetrates everything. You see, it's like, it's weird. It's like that, I mean, does it even make sense for me to point this out? But the way we usually think of space is that it's populated by objects, and the objects are not penetrated by space. They are surrounded by space, no? But I realized that it made a difference if I looked at everything as being shot through by space, shot through with space. Sometimes people hint at that when you have some kind of interest in physics, you know, that we realize that there's a lot of space between atoms, and you know, even if we, I think it breaks down kind of the idea of space and location breaks down in subatomic spaces. But anyway, a pretty common popular idea is that if you look at a seemingly solid object, it's mostly space. It's not really so much matter. It's more space than matter. So objects are shot through with space. But then there's still this idea that space flows around the solid matter. But that seemingly solid matter is like, what if we think that it's also shot through with space? It's just all space. Now, this can all just be a kind of intellectual play, like I'm talking about it now. You might find it intriguing or boring, or, you know. But when I think about Buddhism, I see Buddhism as a teaching that has the intention to facilitate a transformation in the direction of liberation, wisdom, and compassion. And if some intellectual play with the idea of space does not contribute to a transformation in the direction of liberation, wisdom, and compassion, then it's not Buddhism. So this shift in view that space connects and expands into a kind of unconfined infinity, and not only that it penetrates, and that we can maybe even begin to see it as having agency. You know, I'll get to it later. These shifts in view, are they liberating? Do they liberate us from unnecessary suffering? Do they promote wisdom and compassion? That's to be, we need to find out. But just to give a hint of what I mean is like, this view that deeply structures our life, that space separates, right, puts us into a kind of chronic opposition to the world. It's like, I'm here, the world is out there, and now I need to negotiate how I belong in it. If there's stuff that I don't like, I need to reject it or at least have some opinion about it. And negotiate what I want to be connected with and what I want to stay separate from and so forth. Something that I find absolutely fascinating is this idea that physical space accommodates everything. All the objects and events of the world are accommodated by space. And I have never seen space have any objection or problem with anything. It just doesn't. It remains calm and collected, it seems like. It's not going anywhere, and it doesn't have judgment. Even what we call bad is completely accommodated and accepted by space. And there is an isness to that, right? It's like, it's so fundamental, it just is. Being is that which is accommodated by space. It's like, there's no question about it. When you move into the direction of accepting someone as they are, just accepting how someone you know and live with, maybe, let's imagine that, accepting them as they are. Just if we just think of that as like an interest of ours, and a possibility, and it might be possible. You could say, like, you have to make yourself like space. You have to just be fully accommodating of how this person is. And they can move freely around in the space that you are making for them. Now, when someone does that for us, I think we feel free and loved. Now, loved, that may require a little bit more, some warmth and affection and bondedness. But without such spaciousness that accommodates the way we are, the other qualities of love become compromised. No? It's like, if we're really allowed to be just the way we are, then that's a very good foundation. So, if I want to be this person who creates a good foundation for acceptance and love, I'm now saying I feel like I need to make myself like space. Now, I think we have a tendency, and it's reinforced by our culture, to separate the world into inside and outside. And when you do that in terms of space, you maybe say there's physical space, like something physics studies. And there's been an evolution of how space is viewed in physics, as you're probably aware, right? There's a classical view, Newtonian view, and then there's an Einsteinian view where space is bent by objects. That's kind of hard for us to accept. That a hard science has such weird ideas of like space is not an evenly distributed neutral thing, but it's actually bent by the objects that are in there, and that way creates, what we experience as gravity. If this is a new idea to you, look it up. So anyway, there's physical, external space, and then we do use that word in various ways. There's an internal space. Let's say that's a psychological or mental space, and we use metaphors of space to describe, like you have room for something, psychologically, you make room for somebody, or you maintain openness for new ideas, or you make space for your emotional states, something, right? But the idea is that that's like there's an external space that's physical, and then there's an internal space that is mental and psychological and subjective. Well, I think this separation doesn't work very well. And I'm not really interested right now in going into some sort of philosophical discussion of, mind and matter and space and mind and so forth, but clearly what we call the physical space does appear within our senses. It appears as a visual space, it appears as an auditory space, like I can locate sound out there this way or that way and so forth. So what we call this external space is completely produced by our sensory activities. Like to separate it as if it was rigidly something categorically different, it just doesn't make any sense. Now, and it doesn't make any sense for me because I'm not doing science or something where maybe that separation creates some advantage. I'm interested in studying experience and how it can lead to liberation from suffering, wisdom, and compassion. So I'm interested in my spatial experience. And there it shows up in different levels. Like I just said, are you open to ideas, or are you rigidly clinging to ideas that you've already settled on? If that rigidly clinging will put you in opposition to these other ideas, and so it's like that is also a way to separate yourself. If you become spacious, you'd say like, I've got some ideas floating around in my mind. Some are more familiar to me than others, and now some other ideas floating in space. I let that be there, accommodating it as also present. And you can have that with feelings, and you can have that with people. Objects you don't like. was just on vacation and visited various public facilities, state parks, and so forth. You walk into a public toilet, and there's various objectionable, things in that space. Particularly smelled. Right? I find this like practicing with smells is one of my favorite things. It's like because it's so visceral, like to try to get. So smell is something very spatial, right? It completely penetrates the space, and so it's sort of a futile attempt to try to get away from it. Like, where to? Like, yes, you can leave the space and close the door, but if you have to be there out of necessity, then, what are you going to do? The only way to alleviate suffering here is to just open up to it as being what is the case. Plus, sorry, I didn't want to drift into this too much, but I'm just thinking, like, once you sit down and contribute to the smell, you can really see yourself participating fully. It's not other, right? This stuff is not really other. Opening up to what is objectionable. That is a kind of making room and being in the same space with it. Now, we don't have to say that this is like that you approve of what you're in the same space with. You're just accepting it there as being there. You just acknowledge its isness. We don't have to, it's neither good nor bad on that level. You see what I'm saying? It's not like by becoming spacious that we endorse everything. It's actually one level below of, like, I think the vision here is something like you can move, if you are not identified with your objections and your clingings, then the vision would be you could move through the world with more ease and less friction. And that is liberation. Now, I had this experience yesterday, and I shared it with some of you who were at morning zazen yesterday. We were sitting, and then it's followed by chanting, bowing and chanting. And so I experienced our chanting yesterday morning. I experienced it as harmonious. Sometimes it's not so harmonious. Sometimes it's more harmonious. So yesterday it was more harmonious, and I noticed that. And I was studying what this perception of harmony, like the way pitch and pace and rhythm is lined up between the voices. And things are in sync, or, in various dimensions. What was it doing to my experience? How was that feeling in my body? I took some interest in that. And what happened is, I'm trying to stay close to, like, the sensation level of my experiencing. It did feel like something was opening up it's like the release of a contraction, just like and a satisfaction that came with that, and a kind of a lightening easefulness that entered into my experience. And yes, a kind of connection, like feeling connected with with the surrounding bodies were also making sounds, and I felt more as part of a field rather than a kind of separate individual. And on top of that, it's like, I don't know if you have this experience, but for me it's like I can experience myself as an agent of my chanting or singing or speaking. Right? But when this harmonious experience was present and this opening up and lightening and increase of ease occurred, it felt like I was being chanted by the group. It's like I'm getting carried along by what is happening around me. I just have to sort of, with ease, just join in. It's not like it's less effortful. And maybe it's too extreme to say that, and it sounds a little woo-woo, I'm being chanted, But you see what I'm saying, right? It's like maybe it's both. Maybe it's I'm being chanted and I'm chanting at the same time, and I don't have to differentiate the two. They're just co-occurring or something. Like this text we discussed earlier this year, Dogen's fascicle, Undivided Activity. Just the word undivided activity applies here. It's like it's an undivided activity between others and myself. And he says life is like riding in a boat. I set the sails and there's a rudder and there's a pole, and I'm using those implements. I'm paraphrasing what he says. I'm using those implements to propel the boat forward, so I am riding the boat. And at the same time, he says, the boat is giving me a ride. It's like that. I am chanting, but at the same time, the chanting of the others is giving me a ride, is giving me a chant. And Dogen brings in the environment. He says there are, again, I'm paraphrasing, there is the water and there is the shore and there's the wind, and those surrounding circumstances of the boat, you could say, are also giving the boat a ride. Without those circumstances, the boat couldn't give me a ride, or it couldn't ride. It's not conceivable. So then this expands into a field-like vision of where the various components of our experience are collaborating to give us a ride. And Dogen says this is what life is like. In the water, this is also really noticeable, is like if you are very afraid of drowning in the water, you will have to make a lot of effort to stay above water and, exert your strength in your swimming. If you're an experienced swimmer and you have trust, then you can harness the buoyancy of the water, right? It's like you let a lot of your body just float, and then you do little movements to propel yourself. So you are being buoyed by the water, and also you are swimming. So it's this kind of interaction. And when I run, which is like a fairly regular practice for me, I can feel that too. It's like there can be an effortfulness in the way I propel myself. But once a certain harmony sets in, and the harmony is not between different people, it's now between the different elements of my running, and between breath and movement and the ground, whether it's an incline or even ground and so forth, and the temperature. And when a certain harmony sets in, then it feels like I'm being run. And it's like, I think athletes know this state very well, and it's maybe why they continue doing their sport, because there's really a feeling of buoyancy, of being almost like you're levitating above the ground. It's like, oh, how did that just happen? In my experience, it just sets in. It's like a click and something turns around, and I'm like, oh, now it's easy. Before it was hard. And this has been described as a flow state and so forth, where the clear distinction between the doer and the activity disappear, and there's just kind of the activity itself that propels itself or something, and you find yourself just enjoying it. Now, so I give these as examples, but I'm always interested in, if you don't have these experiences very clearly, it's like, it's just not, I don't think this is a problem. You might say like, oh, I wish I knew this more fully, okay? I am interested, since we are practitioners, I hope, I'm interested in practice. This is either already part of your experience, or it's a kind of, what do you say, vision that makes sense. You see that it makes sense and that it is a possibility in your life. Then the question is like, with what kind of practice do you approach this? I think one part of practice is to, and this is what we're doing right now, is to challenge your views and to allow a certain kind of thinking that is, at times, I think, at odds with cultural views. And we need to be daring enough to just move ourselves with language into spaces that are not regularly explored by the dominant culture. Like say, let's just drop, say, this distinction between physical and mental space. Like just drop, just don't emphasize it. I'm not saying it can't be separated. I'm just saying, just don't emphasize it. Why? Why do we have to do that all the time? Or the individual, like the person is such a, like, what if we just relax that view? Just relax it. Of course, if somebody says you're not a person, you're like, oh, what? But Buddhism says that. It throws at you the idea of non-self, and then you could just say like, oh, I can't, that makes no sense. So you just have to relax. and allow certain experiences to see if they accumulate around the idea of non-self. Like just this chanting experience is a less self experience. It's like I feel myself less as an agent. I feel myself less struggling against something. But there it is. It's easy. Now, we're all different, but if you've listened to me before, it's like I approach things through the body a lot. And that may be because the kinesthetic channel in me is just more dominant, And there are other people who are more auditory or more visual and so forth. So if you're that person, I apologize that I keep harping about the body. But when it comes to space, we can't avoid it. Because our own body occurs. Okay, so now I'm going to say a few things that are actually, I don't mean fully. The body occurs in space. But then again, that's like space surrounds the body. No, the body is penetrated by space. It's shot through with space. So now we're bringing all this to ourselves. And no, the body is space. We treat the body as an object, which, like we treat everything else an object, and space is the rest. Right? You treat your body like an object, and space is that which is not objectified, which surrounds all these objects. But now I'm saying the body is space. What if you give yourself permission to feel that? And then how do you practice that? And I think for this to make any sense, meditation can be about bringing attention to the body. And because we're stuck in an object view, usually, in the beginning, that's where we start. If you do something like you've heard about, a body scan, you would go through your body and you just attend to and recognize the parts of the body. Now you're breaking down the big object into smaller objects, right? But you're not seeing those things, you're feeling them in what is called the body scan. But you're using a languaged map to say, like, okay, so if I go from the top to the bottom, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but it's like the crown of the head, the forehead. You find your own pattern, the brain. Nobody's ever seen their brain. You're mixing a kind of external view of the body, like a brain and its space and how it looks, with your internal feeling of that space. And it's okay to use that as a map, but when you do it, I want to encourage you to really emphasize the feeling and not the mapping, visual or linguistically. You feel everything. Now, in those felt sensations of the body as you go through it and make a scan, where are the boundaries between those things that you're feeling? I mean, you're going to certain locations that the map tells you to go to, but where's the boundary between the cheek and the eye socket, and like when you feel them? And what you're traveling in with your attention is a space. And certain areas of the space get highlighted and others don't. So to discover the body, your own body, as a felt space, I think is something important. Now, I'm running out of time, kind of. I knew this when I was coming in. It's like it's too much. So I already had this idea. Like I'll have to do a little mini series on space. Like this is shot through with space 1, and then there will be shot through with space 2. So come back 2 weeks from now. Or I don't know whenever I talk again. Somebody's scheduling for me, with me. I had a serious meniscus problem a long time ago, probably now 15 years ago or something. I had it in one knee, and then I had it in the other knee too. And it was terrible. It was so bad that my knee was like locked in a position and I couldn't move it. And it was excruciating pain. And I got it evaluated. I didn't have health insurance at the time. So somebody helped me. Like a doctor friend sent me to his doctor friend. They evaluated me and they say, "Oh, you need surgery." And they say, "How much does it cost?" "Oh, we don't know." You go to the billing department. And then you go there. They go, "Oh, we don't know. It depends on what happens." It's like, this is infuriating. It's like, anyway, it's thousands of dollars for sure. Like 10 or 15 or something crazy, right?
$70,000. That was 20 years ago.
All right. So I decided to not get surgery because I couldn't afford it. But also because I don't like the idea of surgery. And so I saw a body worker, and I learned something. It's like I learned something profound through it on a physical level. This meniscus problem is also a problem of space, because there's a little tear in the meniscus. It's cartilage, it's like a tiny little thing that sticks out, and it gets caught in the gap of your joint, and that causes the pain, and the muscles all freeze up around it in a protective mode and so forth. So if you make more space in your knee, even though you have the tear, your knee can move without pain. Nothing gets repaired, there's just more space. So this body worker helped me create more space, and I never got surgery, and I'm fine, and I'm pain-free. So, all right, that's cool. Then I had this observation that in the recovery process, that my muscles were involuntarily contracting around this pain, and were creating this sort of holding pattern. So I saw some other body worker, physical therapist, and he said, the way you relax muscles is by creating space in the joints. And when you create space in the joints, this is an indication for the muscles to relax. And this was a new idea to me at the time. So I was putting my attention inside of my joint, inside of my knee joint, and what I now call, it's a technical term, think-feel. I was think-feeling an expansion in my joint. And sure enough, the muscles got a cue to relax. Now, I'm giving this to you now as meditators. Do that. Make space in your joints. Think, feel space in your joint. It may take a little practice, but when I do it, so whatever our living, produces some kind of, let's call it stress, and there's kind of contraction that accumulates in the body. And when you sit down for meditation, you can feel that accumulated contraction in your body. You may notice it as mental stress, like your thinking goes like that, but you can also, if you're attuned to feeling your body, you feel it as a kind of contractedness. And it's difficult to release that. If you tell yourself, relax, relax, it's not going to work. You give yourself the stress of having to relax. Good luck. Relaxing is not a doing, it's a non-doing. It's not doing. So if you feel an expansion of space in your joints, like when I do it, I can do it right now. I do it in my finger joints and in my toes too. But the main joints are the ankles, the knees, the hip, the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder, the 6 joints. You know, I practice Qigong, and in Tai Chi is the same. It's like you want those joints always to be relaxed. And what does that mean? It means feeling space in them, feeling the space in them. And it has an effect on the muscles. So when I do it, say to my ankle, it's hard doing standing in an ankle because there's compression there. But in sitting, it's easier. There's a ripple effect throughout my whole body. It's very subtle. But it's like spaciousness spreads throughout the body. Try it out. Yeah, maybe in the next talks I'll give more practical, more practices. But right now, to conclude here, so you begin to feel the space of your own body. And you begin to realize through various practices that, like I just gave one, that you can increase the sense of spaciousness within the body. And that brings a kind of ease and settling and actually a stillness and a willingness to let be. Okay. So now you can, first as a thought experiment and then as also on the level of your bodily sensations, ask yourself whether there's any difference or whether you have to assume any difference between external and internal bodily spaciousness. Like one way to maybe do that is like this increased spaciousness that you feel, let it overflow into external space. Let it overflow into the visual. Let it overflow into the auditory. When that is successful, you shouldn't be bothered by sounds. They just kind of occur. You see that, and that is an extent, that's an elaboration of Space Connects now, like overflowing from the spaciousness of your felt body. It's like, if you have an objection to a sound that is bothering you, space immediately starts separating. And now bring that feeling of how this space seemingly inside and this external space seemingly outside are not divided. They're undivided. And then begin to see that this same space penetrates all objects that seem opaque structures in the world. You need to relax the idea of self and other, of mine and yours. It's like if you feel compelled to think that, oh, this felt space is my space, then it just doesn't make sense to say like, oh, these objects are out there are my space, because they're not quite your space. You have a special relationship to this body that's different. Just relax that. It just all occurs within an undivided space. And see what happens. Like in the running that I described, maybe there is a point where something clicks and you're kind of like feeling yourself in a different mode of operating. And we just look out for shifts like that. If you try to grasp them as some kind of awakening or making progress, you kill them. You need to relax. You don't need to make any progress. You're just experimenting. You're just looking for shifts and starting to feel more used to living with a certain kind of shift. It's nothing special. It's just a different way of being in the world. But it's not just a different way. It's actually, it's less suffering. It's more nourishing. It actually is the seed of compassion and wisdom. Anyway, that's something to spell out in the future, maybe. Thank you for your attention.